Religion in the Middle Ages ruled minds and souls. People piously believed in hell and paradise, feared to anger God, observed all the fasts and restrictions. One of the strictest prohibitions was the taboo on the manifestation of sexuality. Intimacy for women was supposed to be an act of procreation or the fulfillment of a man's physiological needs. She was supposed to be a log with the man, not making a single sound. And it was the man's duty to maintain a semblance of fidelity to the spouse with whom he stood under the crown. But human desires are hard to shackle, and no horror of possible hell could warn against irrational behavior. Forbidden pleasures were not only tasted by the men and women of secular society. A lot of interesting things happened behind the high walls of women's convents. The Sisters of Christ colored their lives in any way they could. Littlemore Priory in England. The monastery was founded in the far reaches of Oxfordshire in the 12th century. The sinfulness of the nuns was committed there with enviable regularity for nearly 2 centuries. The nuns did not fast. They let in men from the nearest village, drank wine with them, and indulged in merrymaking. The abbess, Catherine Wells, who abused the nuns, starved them, and locked them in a closet, ruled the place. She herself quietly broke all religious commandments and lived with a priest who was also not afraid of God's punishment. They even had a child with whom the whole monastery babysat, writes British historian Sarah Rhys-Jones in her works. Violation of religious canons nuns in every possible way justified and did not consider it a sin. Many anecdotes and statements about morals in medieval monasteries confirm this fact. We all make mistakes, repented a nun when everyone noticed her growing belly. When the rumors reached the bishop, he sent an ecclesiastical inspection. All assumptions were confirmed that the convent had become a brothel. It was disbanded, the nuns kicked out. A recent excavation found 2 bodies, a man and a woman with a small child. Such cruel secrets the convent kept. Escape from the monastery. There were girls who went to the monastery voluntarily. Someone remained in old maidens, someone was afraid of childbirth, as it often led to death. But there were also those who were imprisoned by the malice of their parents, and the dream of the girls was the same, to escape anywhere, just to get all the delights of life. In the early 14th century, a nun escaped from York Priory. Escape was considered a mortal sin and stirred up the clergy. Find Jean and oblige her to return to the monastery. Reads a document of the time signed by Archbishop Melton. Jean spent a long time preparing for her escape, first feigning illness and then faking her death. Of course, she had help. She could not have accomplished such a difficult task alone. Not only did she not take care of her soul, but she deceived the nuns who were devoted to the church with all their souls. This misguided sheep is not even ashamed of the fact that a dummy was buried and celebrated instead of her. This dummy was consigned to the earth where true servants of God rest. She has defiled even the dead. The Archbishop wrote, after making her escape, Nun Jean found her freedom, had time to enjoy life, and tasted a taste of will. Her desire to keep the escape a secret by emulating death failed. The plot was revealed. The further fate of Jean is not reflected in the documents, and her fate is unknown. Escapes from the monastery walls were made by other girls. Usually the escape was prepared over a long period of time and very carefully. It was not enough to simply leave the convent. It was necessary to find people who would help, hide and give shelter. Often girls ran away with their secret lovers and became their keepers. Documents compiled in the Middle Ages are unmistakable evidence that convents of women were more dissolute than the brothels of the time. Their gates were open to wealthy men. Sacred dignitaries were also involved in these affairs, and many nuns became pregnant and gave birth, writes Professor Sarah Rhys-Jones. Church authorities fought the promiscuity as best they could. In one cloister, the abbess was walled up. In others, guards were posted so that the nuns could spend time in seclusion and penance for their sins. In the cells, love letters were found outlining the minute details of the liaison and expensive clothes worn to seduce guests. The belief that monasteries in the Middle Ages were abodes of austerity, obedience, chastity and holiness is very false. Nuns, once in the convent, did not forget the worldly life, found secret ways to savor life. And often morals in women's convents reign more free than in secular society, where women were obliged to keep themselves strict and chaste, and not even a glance to give away their desires. Some havens for nuns so attracted noble suitors eager for comfort that they were called houses of tolerance for the noble. Many punishments were devised in medieval cities to preserve the morals of nuns and clerics of all ranks. But historical facts confirm that people sinned, and even the fear of anathema could not stop them from forbidden pleasures and promiscuity.